Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast. Today is a fascinating podcast interview with Christopher Jones, a hand reader who has been helping guide people and gain more self-actualization through his hand reading for over 37 years. Christopher busts the myth that hand reading is like fortune telling. In fact, he says it's a lot more about your current state of consciousness. Christopher tells us what sort of things you can discover about someone by reading their hands, such as health, how each organ is functioning, illnesses, trauma, sexual abuse, big life changes, self-awareness, consciousness, self-love, and so much more. He explains how getting in-depth hand reading can help you discover aspects of yourself or give you the confirmation you need to move forward in a successful and authentic manner. You can book a reading with Christopher at his Facebook page, which is Samitsu. It's SANMITSU. That will be in the show notes for you to find as well if you're curious on checking out his work or booking a hand reading with him. I suggest you watch this podcast episode instead of listen to it on my YouTube channel because it's a little bit easier to see what he's talking about when he's pointing at the certain lines on your palms and how to read them. I also want to mention Christopher knew nothing about me before this podcast interview, yet he was able to specifically note so many things from my past and my present that were spot on. I found it fascinating. From this podcast interview, I've also learned how to kind of read other people's hands as well, which is so exciting and interesting. So I know if you guys listen through with this podcast episode, you will be able to find out a little bit more about yourself through your own palms and your hands, which is so exciting. And from there, you can look at other people's hands, your friends and family, and tell them about what the lines on their hands and palms mean as well. I hope you guys gain a lot from this information-packed episode, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, Christopher. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast.
Hi, thanks, Arel, for having me today. That's fantastic to see you.
Thank you. First question I have for you is what elevates your soul?
Wow. The most important thing is the joy of connectivity with another and finding a kind of deep, resonant connection to another human being, and the joy and the expansiveness that comes from that is probably the most important thing in my life.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate to be in that position right now. So no question, that's the most important thing in life and the most important thing that we should all try and have in our lives.
I'd love to ask you, what sort of things can you discover about a person by reading their hands?
Let me proceed and I shall tell you all. The hand basically is a map of human consciousness. So on your hand, you have your fingerprint patterns, which everybody knows. Everybody has a unique set of fingerprint patterns. Everybody knows that your fingerprint patterns are not the same as anybody else's, not even identical twins of identical fingerprint patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, you also know that fingerprint patterns don't change. So they're permanent markers of you for this life. So they are absolutely an indicator of both your individuality, and also they're indicative of your kind of your life path in this life. They are, from a medical point of view, fingerprint patterns are genetic. There's been a huge amount of studies done into the genetic significance of fingerprint patterns. But from a metaphysical point of view, the fingerprint patterns are like the patterns of your karma, and they basically demonstrate the kind of some of the life lessons you're going to have in this life, and some of the life things you need to be accomplishing or achieving within this life.
Wow.
So they're incredibly potent markers of what life is about for you as an individual. And the thing is, what's interesting about that is that everybody knows this. I mean, you know, I've told you two things about the hand that you actually already knew, which is you had a unique set of fingerprint patterns, and you knew that the fingerprint patterns didn't change. You didn't understand the metaphysical significance of fingerprint patterns. But when you start looking into the skin ridge patterns in that way and start understanding the psychological significance of them, then the sort of the meaning of that gets unpacked, and self-discovery arises. The second thing that you look at in the hand is the hand structure. So you've got things like the fingers, the nails, the thumb, the shape and structure of the palm itself. That's called the morphogamy of the hand. And the morphogamy of the hand, again, is pretty consistent. It doesn't change very much. Because, and a lot of, like, your shape of your hand is usually biological, so it's genetic, like the shape of your body. You know, if you're tall and thin, it's because you've got tall and thin parents, and if you've got short and squat parents, you'll be short and squat too. The physical body was a reflection of the genetic parenting that you have. So the hand shape itself can show something that. Yeah, most of the time, exactly. Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah.
But the fingers represent, so the palm represents the body, and the fingers represent the mind. So what you get with the fingers is you get a differentiation of the four elements: water, earth, fire, and air. And when you look at the condition of the fingers, you see the different psychological patterns that a person has. So the fingers could be long, the fingers could be short, the fingers could be knotty, the fingers could be smooth, the fingers could be bent, like a couple of your fingers are.
Yeah.
And we kind of have an idea of how a finger should be in terms of its structure, and then any deviation from that becomes interesting and significant. So, for example, the middle finger should be the longest, and these two fingers should be equal length, and this finger here should be the shortest and should come up to a certain marker on the hand there. So there's an idea of like how the hand should be, and then deviations from that describe the sort of personality and the psychology that you have.
Right.
The third factor in the hand is the lines of the hand. And the lines of the hand are what most people think, oh, that's what you look at when you read hands. Well, actually, it's not. It's actually not the most important thing. And the main reason why it's not the most important thing is because the lines change over time. So the lines are much more dynamic. So people think that the lines are consistent. They're not. The fingerprints don't change.
Okay.
But the lines do. And so in traditional palmistry, like 500 years ago, they would look at the lines and they would make predictions from the lines, and they would be talking about how long you're going to live, whether you can become famous, how many babies you can have, you know, get married, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. All the stuff which, in fact, you actually can't see from the hand at all. None of that stuff can be found in the hand.
Okay.
And one of the main reasons why you can't do any predictions from the hand is because the lines of the hands change over time. Okay, it's impossible to tell. It's impossible to say, oh, when you're 50, this is going to happen to you. If you're 25 now, you just don't know what the lines are going to look like in 25 years' time. Yeah. And I've been doing handprint. I've been doing handwriting now about 37 years. Wow. So I've got handprints that I took in the early middle 80s, and I've taken again like in the last 2 years. So I've got handprints that I've taken 35 years apart. And I've been doing a study this year compiling the kind of changes that happen in people over that time period.
Yeah.
Now, having said that the lines of the hands change, they only change if you change. So if you don't change and you don't evolve, then guess what? The lines of your hands don't change very much. But if you change and transform your life, the lines in your hands change.
And the lines in your hands, you're meaning the palms, right? So if everyone after listening to this is going to be wanting to take a photo of their palm every year. Seeing
and they should, or at least probably every 5 years or something like that. You know, right. I mean, it depends on how intensively the change process that you're going through. But right. if you want to have a kind of marker of, is somebody spiritually evolving? Is somebody resolving their trauma? Is somebody kind of becoming a better person in whatever way? Yeah. Then that will be marked in the hand. But let me just give you some really practical examples of that, because it sounds complicated. It's actually not, because the hand, for example, furnishes a lot of information about your health and your illness. So we talked a bit before about the back of the hand. We talked about the nails. The nails are really important from a medical diagnostic point of view. And there's a whole body of literature which means you can just describe heart disease, lung disease, kidney dysfunction, and so on from the state of the nails. But the lines do that too. And what happens when people get ill, the lines of the hand start deteriorating. And then when they get better again, the lines go back together again. And you can track these changes over a period of time. A really good example is pregnancy. So a woman, you can take a handprint of a woman before she's pregnant, during pregnancy, and then after pregnancy. What you see is the sort of the changes that her body goes through during that time. And I mean, obviously, there's huge hormonal changes. All those hormonal changes can be seen in the hand. I've seen people who've had their thyroid removed, and you can see the absence of the thyroid gland on the hand. I've
Oh my
seen people
goodness.
with adrenal stress on their hand.
Yeah.
And you can tell whether someone's got like a pregnant woman. Her liver is working overtime because her liver's having to process all the waste products of the baby as well as her. So you get these markings in the hand that show the kind of toxicity building up in her bloodstream because she's having to, like, her liver's overworking. You can see that in the hand too. And then when she's not pregnant, all those stresses, all those hormonal changes, all those pressures on her body, like, they all go away. So it's really quite a quick thing to see.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who was he's a musician who's I took his handprints, I think, in 1984, and I took his handprints again last year, and he suffered a lot of mental illness in his life. He sort of schizophrenia and depression, and he tried to commit suicide when he was about 22, which was around the time I took the handprints. So, which was quite interesting because, of course, that was at the height of kind of his mental instability. Yeah. And I took his handprints again, like last year when I was in the UK, and he said, I'm really worried about this. I mean, my hands are going to be completely fucked, aren't they? And it was great. And I took his handprints, and they were not. Like, all the markings of the paranoia, the duality, the schizophrenia, the depression, they'd all gone. They'd all gone in 35 years. They'd all disappeared. They'd all completely evaporated from his hand. And he was really worried that his hand was going to be worse than it was before. Yeah. And it wasn't. It was better. And so when I sort of thought about that, I was thinking, well, what did he do? You know, he's a musician. He's a guitarist. He's a jazz musician. And he plays the guitar 8 hours a day, every day. And he's been playing the guitar 8 hours a day, every day for the last 30 years. And that's what he does. That's his life, you know. And he's basically kind of done music therapy on himself, and that's kind of, you can see the kind of effects of the changes in his hand like that. So so when you understand, I'll just wrap that up, next question can pop in, but just if you when you understand that the lines of the hands change, then what you realize that what you're looking at the hand isn't about a prediction of the future at all. It's about understanding what you are right here, right now. The lines of the hand are kind of reflections of your consciousness, how you're experiencing things. You know?
Yeah, that's
so they're not insignificant, but they're not as important as the fingerprints, because the fingerprints don't change. Yeah. But the lines can change. So what you've got what's got roughly represented in the hand is you've got this kind of mixture of things that we can't do anything about, like our genetics. We can't change anything out of our genetics. Yeah. And the things that we have within our power to change and ameliorate and affect, and that's what life's like. You know, there's some things we can't do anything about, some things we can, and if we're lucky, we have the wisdom enough to know the difference between those two things. So it's kind of like that's very empowering. So what you get with that situation, of course, is that gives you have that information and that understanding that enables you to make informed choices about who you are, that allows you to uncover those things that have been problems. Yeah. And that allows you to live more authentically with yourself. And then that allows you to authentically relate to someone else better. And that allows that joy to come
back to the first question I asked you, right? Elevating your soul. So when people are looking at their hands right now, for example, my two palms, the lines on them are different. So when you're doing a hand reading, which palm, like which hand are you looking at if they're different? And is it common that they're different on people, their hands?
Yeah, it's very rare for the two hands to be the same. Okay. And so what you generally look at is you look at both hands. You have to look at both hands, but you can say that the hand that's dominant, like if you're right-handed, then your right hand is your dominant hand. Right. And generally speaking, the patterns on the dominant hand tend to represent the active processes within a person's life. So, for example, that might be more descriptive of the job that they do. Right. That's not always true, but it's usually more manifestation of what expresses what they're manifesting in the world. Whereas the passive hand is what you're more like when you're at home. So they're kind of like, it's like your inner self and your outer self, like the two different parts of yourself.
That makes sense.
So what's interesting to look at with hands is to look at what's the same in both hands, and also what's different in both hands. So if we just talk about your lines on your hand, if you just look at both your hands,
Yeah.
If you look at I'll just tell you what the three main lines are, okay? And then you can identify them. So the line that goes around the ball of your thumb, that's called the earth line.
Earth line, yeah.
Or the lifeline in palmistry, we call it the earth line.
Okay.
Then the line that goes across the hand that starts in about the same spot, that's called the air line.
Air, okay.
To do with your mentality, your psychology, and your intellect. And the line underneath the fingers that starts under the little finger and goes towards the index finger, that's called the water line or the heart line.
The water
and
line.
That's to do with your emotions and the way you relate to other people. Now,
Wow.
if you look at the ending of your major water line, they are pretty much the same. They both got this kind of overlap bit. So your water line comes to about here.
Yeah.
And then you've got another little bit that goes up between the fingers.
Yeah.
A slightly different shape in your right hand. It's slightly longer.
Yeah.
The overlap's a bit longer, but you can see that it's an overlap like that. Can you see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's consistent in both your hands. But what's interesting about that is is how that's developed in your right hand. So that duplicated line is longer in your right hand than it is in your left hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you look at the beginning of your earth and air lines, in your left hand they're separated, and in your right hand they're joined.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Right.
I always wondered about that.
You always wondered about that? Well, here's the moment where you wonder will no longer need to wonder.
People are looking, I'll just say it again for those who are listening. So the earth line, also known as the lifeline, the one that wraps kind of around the thumb, and then the air line, the one that's kind of in the middle that goes across the palm. Some of those will connect on the end and some of them won't. And what would be the main difference when they connect versus when they don't connect?
All right, so here's the situation. The major air and the major earth line is particularly to do with your relationship with your family and your upbringing and your background. And when the major air and the major earth line are separated, that shows there's a real strong desire to get away from your background. Somebody with those two lines separated doesn't identify with their background, doesn't want to relate to that background, doesn't want to have anything to do with that background. It's like you feel disconnected from it because the two lines are disconnected. It's normal for the two lines to be joined together because your sense of identity as a young human being, like a 16, 18, 20-year-old, is very strongly derived by the relationship to your family. Yeah. But if you've had an unfortunate relationship with your family, or if your parents weren't there for you, or you felt alienated from your family, I mean, lots of examples that when the airline is separated from the earth line, it generally means that the person has to get old soon. They have to grow up soon when they're younger, like take responsibility for themselves, or they leave home at 12 or 14, or a parent dies and they have to sort of fend for themselves because one parent's working and no one's looking after them anymore.
All right.
So it's often
so for my hands, when one of them is disconnected and one of them's connected, like, how do I know which one's which then? Because my hands are.
Let me just finish explaining, and I'll try and tie that together for you. So instinctively, internally in you, there is some kind of deep revulsion against being constrained. There's some deep need to kind of keep separate. So you kind of have this aloofness, which is I'm going to come to that because that's reflected in your waterline as well. But it's an aloofness that is born out of something that wasn't grounding or providing you a sense of belonging in your family. So there's something wrong in your family that you're kind of running away from because you don't feel like you belong. Because as I say, those two lines should be joined. You know, in a normal, good, healthy family situation, the family provides the foundation for the personality. Right. Now I just want to augment on your right hand. If you look at the two lines, they're not just that they're joined together. If you look at it, the airline actually starts underneath and it sort of jumps out. Yeah. And that always indicates a real fight. That's more like it's more like not only was I isolated, I was constrained, I was repressed, I was held back, and I had to break free. And where the line kind of leaps out, can you see what I mean? It kind of leaps out from the earth, from the earth line.
They almost intertwine at the end.
They kind of, it starts underneath and it goes whoom like that. Yeah. If you look at it carefully. And when you see that, that's like, I am going to break free of this. And it's like a determined effort. So almost like a kind of, It's like a sort of getting out of breaking out of jail or something like that. It has that kind of feeling about it for you. It's like it requires a huge amount of effort to kind of get over the strength and the power of the conditioning of your family experience and family environment.
Yeah.
So it might mean that your parents were very conservative or very orthodox or very repressive, or there was some terrible situation or circumstance, but it's something you felt you had to get away with, you had to fight. So it's kind of, for you, it's a kind of combination of like, well, I don't feel connected to my family and I feel oppressed by my family. So on your left hand, you're detached, and on your right hand is like, get me the fuck out of here. So it's kind of like, it's a kind of combination.
And if someone had that same thing, like had that broken, that was the water line going up to index finger, and that usually reflects that they have a hard time fully opening up and being fully vulnerable with someone they're in an intimate relationship with. If they find someone down the road that they get in a relationship with, and that person helps them, helps break them open, and they become vulnerable and they open up to this one special person who they meet someday in their life, over time, will that line form? Like, can that happen?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the most important quality in that is feeling safe.
Yes.
And if, I don't know, I'm going to assume you're heterosexual, but if the guy is not able to make you feel safe, then you're not going to open up.
Yeah.
And so it's about their capacity to hold space and make you feel safe, in that kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean, where you can be open is, you can be open in a situation like this because it's safe.
Yeah.
It's easy for you to be safe, for you to be open online and social media, because you're not physically under threat.
And I forgot what I was about to say with the relationship. With bisexual. And with the safety thing, that is my biggest issue in my life, and I know that was ripped away from me from some traumatic experience when I was very young, is that feeling of safety in my whole life.
It's everything.
Yeah,
it's everything. But so you asked the question, what can you see from the hand? And I've just told you I told you all about the trauma of your childhood from 2 features of your hand. All right. And despite what made
family.
And what, sorry?
And my relationship to my family. Like, yes, I am the black sheep. I do feel ostracized from my own mother, from my own family. Like, yes, I felt I needed to get away. I'm on the other side of the world of them right now. They're living on the other side of the world together. So it's so on point.
Yeah. And it's that's the when you see that sort of thing in the hand, it's like, that's really potent to acknowledge that, and really potent to discuss that. And it's like, one of the most important aspects about doing hand reading is that kind of recognition. I mean, you've got a situation whereby, you are ostensibly open and you talk about things, but you don't know me, but within 5 minutes I've just told you about the deepest secrets of your life. And it's like, and you can, and that that's not just you making it up. I've actually got an exterior map of that. Just to give you an example, it's quite a traumatic story, but I think it's worth telling, because I was at a festival earlier this year in March, before the lockdown, and a woman came for a hand reading, and she's about 25, I think. And immediately, as soon as I saw her hand, I knew she'd been sexually abused.
Right.
And I was looking at his hand, and I was going, like, I was getting like these spirit shivers down my spine, and I was going, whoa, okay, I've got 15 minutes. How do I talk about this with this woman in 15 minutes? It's like, oh God, that's going to be really difficult, because I can't not talk about it, because it's so obvious. And I was looking at her hand, trying to work out what to say. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, but I don't know if it really happened. And that was literally the first thing she said to me. So she knew that I picked up on it.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, but I don't, I mean, I didn't say anything. That's what she said. I don't know. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, it did
happen.
And then she just cried.
Wow.
We didn't need to go into the whole detail of what happened to her, but what she needed was an acknowledgement that what she has some vague memories about, was actually true. She's from England. She basically hitchhiked her way from England to New Zealand. She'd spent 4 years She did not fly anywhere to get to New Zealand. She went on boats. She went through South America. She basically, she kind of was almost like walked barefoot from the UK to New Zealand and ended up at this festival. And I kind of, one part of me was going, well, hang on, that's like, whatever you're running away from, that's big. But it was obvious in her hands. The trauma was right there in her hands. So,
can I please ask, what was it that made you know it was sexual trauma versus just any other childhood trauma?
No, I don't really want to talk about that because people will make the wrong kind of interpretations of things. It's quite a complicated and subtle thing, you know. It's like there are a number of different factors, and you kind of have to weigh them up together. But a lot of the process of hand reading is kind of listening and kind of tuning into people. And obviously, when you're holding someone's hand, you pick up things in that way. I mean, I'm not especially intuitive. I'm mainly analytical, and which is also really good because my experience is if you go to a channeler or a psychic or a medium or something like that, you never quite know whether they're right or not right. You never quite know whether they're being inspired or whether they're making it up, or whether they're just having a hot flush because they're a menopausal 50-year-old woman and it's just the mood that's overtaking them at that moment. And I never quite know. And so that's not to say I don't go or don't ignore them completely, but I kind of feel I have to take it with a pinch of salt. What I like about hand reading is you can peg your intuition to something that is verifiable. I mean, I've done lots of studies on the hands over 30 years. One of the best studies I did, I think, in the early 90s, there was a group of people I knew, about 25 people, who were doing a meditation course, and it was a year-long meditation course. And I took their handprints at the beginning of the meditation series, and a year later. And the idea behind this course, they had to do lots of reading and studying, and to do various meditation practices, which they had to do throughout the course of the year. And it was all about developing your psychic abilities and energetic sensitivity to be able to read auras and things like that. And first thing was really interesting was you could see that these people were much more psychic than most people. So the features of the hand that show psychic ability, and there's no question that those are clearly manifest in the hand. So you want to, is this person a medium or not a medium? I'm going to go yes or no, depending on what's in their hand,
Cool.
That's easy. That's easy. But
is
what
that
was
one,
interesting?
can you explain that one online, or is that like they're going to start calling themselves psychic now?
I tell you what, I'll tell you what, send me a message after this and I'll do a post on my Facebook page and then people can go read it. It'll be easier to illustrate it with a picture.
Picture. Awesome. Okay.
But what was interesting about this study was that I mentioned that the airline is to do with your mind and how you think and how you understand. And that was the line that changed the most during that time period. It changed from a few millimeters to an inch, like 2.5 centimeters. Wow. The average length of change over the whole 25 people who did this course after a year of meditation was 1 centimeter. And the longer your airline gets, the more perceptive you become, the more questioning you become. Look at your own airline. Look at the airline in your own hands.
So airline, for those listening one more time, the airline is
the middle one.
Yeah.
The one that goes from the side to the across the hand in the middle.
Across the hand. Yeah, mine kind of starts. One of them it goes all the way to the end. But on the left hand, it starts part.
Okay.
Like a centimeter.
It starts here.
Yeah.
So where it's separated is where it starts in your left hand, and then in the right hand it ends underneath the little finger.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So it's got longer.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So what does that mean? So that basically means that as you've grown into yourself and grown into your adult life, you become much more questioning, you become much more philosophical, you've been much more interested in psychology, you're much more interested in understanding what goes on underneath the surface. Yeah. The shorter airline is more superficial. It's more kind of like content with simple answers. And the longer the airline comes, the more questioning a person gets, the more thinking they want to do, the more they want to understand things. It's like looking at the why behind the what. So a shorter airline is more scientific thinking. We don't really understand the why, we don't care, we just want to know the what and the how. Okay. When you've got an air length airline, a longer one, it's like, that's not good enough. I want to know why the what. I want to know why it's like that. And so it shows a much more questioning mentality. So when the airline grows longer, what that shows is someone who's basically growing in their intelligence and growing in their curiosity and growing in their understanding. And what's really interesting, I did a post about this a few months ago about the airlines of the Dalai Lama and lots of other Swami Vivekananda and various other famous spiritual people. Thich Nhat Hanh was another one, and they've all got really, really, really long airlines that delve down into this part of the hand. So their ability, Sadhguru, Thich Nhat Hanh, and the Dalai Lama, and Swami Vivekananda are all very famous mystics and sages of the ages. And they've all got these incredibly long airlines that basically question the depths of what it is to be a human being and go deep into the psychology of humanity, and obviously the spiritual dimension of that too. And that's the internal part of the hand going right down there.
Yeah.
So the airline quite clearly indicates someone's intellectual orientation. And what we can see with you again is, again, you were brought up in a paradigm of understanding that you found was too limiting and too constraining. And you knew there was more, and you wanted you've been on a quest to try and understand things and to try and develop your own consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's what it means. That's what it means to have an airline that's longer than in your one hand and in the other. Of course, it could be the other way. It could be done the other way. It could be done the other way.
Right.
I'm not joking. My own son, when he was younger, he had a really long airline, and he was really curious. Then he got to 16, and he started taking lots of dope and smoking lots of weed, and it shrunk his airline. It literally, like, he couldn't be bothered to be curious anymore. So he just kind of literally his airline shrunk back.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy. And now?
And well, he's not smoking any weed now, so he's reading Das Kapital by Karl Marx. So I figure he's asking the right questions again. So maybe his airline will grow again, and I'll take his handprints in a few years' time and see. But that's what's interesting, is that you can actually see these things. You know, you can see these things changing in people's handprints over time. And if people's consciousness develop, then the lines of the hands will change to reflect those changes in consciousness.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, so that's a good thing to remember as well. So when you mean like these three main lines in the hand, you actually have to look at the change of the color. Like it's actually like the purple or the pink or the brown line, and not like the creases. So don't look at it like in the light and be like, oh, well, there's all these other creases going in that direction. Like you want it where the dark line ends.
Yeah, it's easier if you take a hand print as well. I mean, if you can take a print of an impression of a hand with ink, and then you can really see all the lines really very clearly.
Yeah.
And it's like the prints are by far the best way of looking at hands. I'll just show you what I mean, because you'll see the lines so much more clearly when you've got an actual print. So if you look at that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You can see the line. You can see where the lines begin and end really clearly when you have an actual print. So.
Wow.
So it's much better if you're doing hand readings to work with a hand print.
Yeah.
Because you can just see all that detail much more clearly, and there's no argument about it either.
Yeah. Can I ask you about one more line? Like I see four main lines in both of my palms, and I think I got a palm when I was like a kid. There's like that one other line that goes down along the earth line. What you mean
the one in the center of the hand? The one in the center of the hand
that kind of goes up.
Yeah, it's if you look at your left hand, it's a bit easy to see. In your left hand, you've got one line that basically it starts at the bottom of the palm.
Yeah.
Right? And it runs up towards the middle finger.
Yeah.
If you look at that in your left hand, it's easier to see it in your left hand, because in your right hand you've got two of those. So if you look at your right hand, you've got one that starts in the middle.
Yeah.
Comes up to about here, and then you've got another one that starts on that side and sort of comes up again. So that's a slightly more complicated formation. But when you get it's a big shearing in the line like that. And what generally find when you get that is people who make big life changes and change their location or their job or the way they are in the world quite dramatically. In fact, you've got a third one. There's a third one between these two horizontal lines. There's another one. So you've actually got three lines kind of cascading up like that towards that finger. So that line's often called the career line. And it often does describe the sort of someone's career path. So when you get a big breaks in it like that, it's generally somebody who does one thing for a period of time and then completely does something else completely, changes completely.
Oh, it's been more than three, but that's why I'm wondering it might be relationships then?
No, not really.
I have a deep relationships. Okay.
I'm not saying you haven't had deep. Sorry, not
Yeah.
just to clarify, not about deep relationships, but about these big life changes.
Just life changes. That makes more sense. Yeah, big life changes. Yeah.
Life changes. Yeah, it's like you're the kind of person that's going to go and do something in one place and then say, right, I've done that now. I'm going to go and live there for 10 years and go do something over there for 10 years.
Yeah, totally.
It's long term, 10 to 15 year type projects. It's not.
Right.
It's not just I
Well,
change
if I have
relationships.
3 already, then I don't know.
Well, it just shows that you're a kind of person that you want to reinvent yourself all the time.
Yeah.
Psychologically as a pattern in your experience.
I actually changed my name as well. My middle name was originally Aurel, and I made it my first name, and I did that when I was like 18 or 19, and that was like a full like, I'm changing my life, I'm changing my name. Maybe it's something like that.
Was your mother very critical?
My dad was really critical. My mom was just, I triggered her. Like, I was the child who wouldn't listen. I was very creative, like the long ring finger, like airy fairy, like always in my own world, was very like fussy. Like, I only wanted to wear dresses as a kid. So I was just, and I had an older sister at the time, and she was just, did whatever, super easygoing, extroverted. And I was like this awkward little introverted child, and I just drove my mom crazy. So I drove my mom crazy, and then my dad was really critical of me. In my younger years, he was much nicer in my older years. So that's why through the process of personal development, I was like, oh, my dad was such a sweetheart. And he died at age 11 when I was 11. So like my memories of him were quite fond of him. Like, he was so wise and he was this amazing man. But then like slowly, like subconscious memories started coming up at the age 4 when he was actually an alcoholic and would like pretty much hit and beat me and my sister sometimes. So then that kind of came up, and then I was like, oh, okay, like that explains why I'm so messed up.
Yeah. And those kind of things have a large impact. I just was wondering about that because of the bent of your in your index finger like that.
Oh yeah.
The index finger being bent like that generally, it generally shows a kind of lack of self-confidence in a way, and it's a lack of self-confidence that's often can have an antecedent in childhood with a very critical parent kind of constantly undermining you.
Okay.
And the index finger is to do with our sense of self-identity. So when your index finger is bent like that, it's like your self-identity as a woman is kind of primarily related to your relationship with your mother. As a guy, it's with your father, because that's, as a kid, that's what you identify with.
Right.
And so it generally, when the finger's bent like that, it generally indicates a problem in the relationship with parents of the same gender. So that's why I was suggesting an overbearing or critical mother.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes those things don't have to be overt. They can just be kind of implicit criticism. If we
move on to the fingers now, as you were saying, like some people have these bent fingers and some are straight, and the different lengths. What do those mean?
Well, in your case, we talked about the long ring finger.
Yeah.
The ring finger is to do with expression and artistic creativity and presentation of image. So whether you like dressing up or whether you like painting or whether your clothes sense and decor is important to you, there's a whole range of things it can manifest as. Sometimes it's all of those things.
Yeah.
But other people have got long index fingers. They're much more introverted, much more kind of self-preoccupied, more psychologically orientated, much more interested in what's going on internally than the image that they present.
Right.
It's so the length of the fingers is important in the proportion of those two fingers. Those are the two fingers that are quite differentiated in terms of
the index and the ring finger.
Yeah, they should be the same length, and they should both be straight. And if they're not the same length, if one's longer than the other and they're not straight, then that tells a bit of a story, So because I'm feeling undermined and I don't feel confident and I don't feel kind of like being accepted, I'm just going to show off and kind of or flirt would be another way that it's done as well, kind of to attract attention.
But will that ever I can't ever see my fingers straightening out. Like if
I've not had experience of those things straightening. It just seems to be something that is like that, and it becomes.
I can imagine someone overcoming that in themselves, but I can't imagine their finger bending.
Well, I mean, but that's it. A lot. I agree, but I think a lot of it, a lot of those things is like, you come to terms with it and you learn how to handle it.
Right.
You know, you can't change the experience. So if you were sexually abused, if you were a child,
Yeah.
you can't change that. It's
Right.
permanently marked you.
Live
It's
with it.
permanently scarred you. But you can either be destroyed by that, or you can, you know, you can make a Me Too movement out of it. You know, it's like
Right.
and those are to do with the choices that you make with your own trauma. And
Yeah.
and our option as human beings is, you know, we all suffer. We all suffer. We all have pain. We all have trauma. We all have stuff that we got to deal with. And the challenge as human beings, and this is very much a spiritual challenge and very much a Buddhist idea, is this like it's turning poison into medicine. So like, how can we turn the things that are bad into things that are good? And that's true for us personally. That's true for relationships. That's true for communities. That's true for societies. That's also true environmentally in terms of the globe. You know, we've got this patterns of behavior. You know, it's poisoning us. So, well, the opportunity we have is to turn it into something positive.
Right.
And it starts with us as individuals. If we don't acknowledge the pain that we've got, if we don't acknowledge the suffering that we experience, if we don't acknowledge the trauma that we've experienced, we're never going to be in a position to deal with them. If we don't deal with them, then we're going to act them out.
Yeah.
So the process, and hand reading is, because it's a self-revelatory process, it helps you to discuss and articulate what's going on in their own internal dynamic. And it's so potent to have someone else talk to you about your stuff. You know, if you and I were going to a counseling session or something, it might be 6 months before we got to this stuff.
Yeah.
Because you'd be kind of like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I'm resistant. I'm kind of covering it up. I've been hiding it from myself for the last 15 years. I don't want to start fucking talking about it now, even though I'm paying you $150 an hour to sit there and listen to me. You know, it's like well, I'm just going, yeah, but girl, you're like this because of this and this happened, and you can't deny that, you know, your parents were like this and this is what happened to you. And you go, oh, yeah, I have to talk about it. And it kind of brings it out straight away.
Yeah.
And it's like, so when I say to people, when people say, what's hand reading like? Is it like fortune telling? I say, no, it's like a year's worth of psychotherapy in an hour and a half.
Wow. Nice.
I mean, if you think about it, you know, like what we've, even in this conversation, the things we've touched on, they're the kind of things that you touch on in a psychotherapeutic encounter, but can normally take quite a long time to get to because of the resistant process that's there. But when you, and the great thing about the hand is like I said about the woman who was sexually abused when she was a child, it's there on the hand. It's like there's an objective manifest. You know, when you're dealing with your own mind, you go, am I imagining it? Is it real? Is that something someone told me? Am I being indoctrinated? You've got to undo all those stories. You can't really see. It can be difficult to see what's going on in your own mind. But it's there on your hand. It's there, right there, right there. It's like, oh my God. And I mean, and that was my own experience when I first started hand reading when I was 20.
Yeah.
And I've been doing all this counseling and sort of self-development work at that time. And I went and had a hand reading. It was like, oh my God, I've just wasted 9 months of my life. Everything I've just been trying to find answer to, it's already there in my hand. And it kind of explained a whole bunch of things about why I was the way I was, why I was like the way I was. And it was mind blowing. It was revelatory, and it completely changed my life from that point. And that's the experience that I have as a hand reader for people is, and the potency of it is it's like you can really change people's lives. You can really open up a whole sort of path of evolution for people. And if you look at the comments that people have posted on my Facebook page from people who've had hand readings with me and what they've said about the impact of it, and that's exactly what the story that they're telling. And my problem as a hand reader is everybody thinks it's about fortune telling. Everybody thinks it's about how long you're going to live and how many babies you're going to have and how many tall strangers you're going to meet. You know, it's like, no, it's so much more. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, exactly. And just one more question I wanted to touch on. My middle fingers, one of them goes kind of straight up and one of them is curved to the
towards
side.
What, the ring finger?
With my index finger.
It's curved towards the ring finger?
Yeah, like even my nail, when I get my nails done at the salon, they're always like, your nails, like the middle finger.
Is your ring finger bent towards your middle finger as well? Are they kind of bent together like that?
Ring fingers pretty
straight. No, just in your left hand. Just in your left hand.
I think the ring finger is straight, but the middle finger and the index finger, I don't know why my middle finger.
Well, the middle finger being bent just basically is rebellious. Okay. So if you think of that's a finger confirmation of the separation of the air and earth line. Right. So you think your finger should be like that, and your earth finger's going over there.
Yeah.
But really, what you're saying is that.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. So it's like, oh, your family, tradition, authority, get away from me. I'm over here. I want to
Right.
separate. It's like it's trying to get away from it, like that. So
Running
it's,
away
and
from
also
my
it's bent. So
family.
and
Interesting.
it's bent, and when the finger's bent, it kind of, it's like it weakens that quality, and that's the earth finger. So that's to do with family, tradition,
Uh,
culture, rules, the law, traditional values, Christianity,
wow.
whatever. You know, that's like, I don't want any of that. I want to destroy that. I want to knock that down. I don't agree with it. I want to get away from it. You know, so
Wow.
it's
So the middle finger's like the earth,
yeah,
and then is there an air or water or fire finger?
yeah.
Yeah.
The index finger's water,
Okay.
because that's your sense of self. The
Yep.
middle finger is earth,
Yep.
family, and your relationship to the culture in which you live. The
Yep.
ring finger is fire, artistry, self-presentation. So
Okay.
anything that's fire is all that extrovert energy, like expressive energy.
Yeah. Express. Yeah.
And then the little finger's air.
And what does that represent? The air.
Communication,
Okay.
and also it says a lot about sexuality and relationships as well.
Oh, anything you can touch on with this? With the
I probably need to see your hand in the flesh to talk about that with you right now. And
interesting.
maybe and you probably just edited it out anyway, so I probably shouldn't say it. So
Interesting.
one more thing. You got the thumb as well, and the
Yeah.
thumb is ruled by the element ether.
Ether.
So
Ah, okay. Yeah.
or spirit or chi, if you like. You know, the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether.
Okay.
So
And does it mean anything like when the tip of the thumb bends back more or it's more
yep,
straight?
yep.
What's the difference in that?
It depends how bendy it is and where it bends. But when the thumb is bendy at the top, it shows a more easygoing and flexible personality. When the
Okay.
thumb is really stiff and strong, it's like someone who's very rigid and very determined, and someone who doesn't go with the flow, doesn't change that. No, they sort of very one track minded about things. So
Yeah.
the strength of the thumb is to do with it shows the ability to affect change in the world, and the stronger your thumb, the more powerful and effective you are as in the world, and the more bendy the thumb, the more accommodating you are. So it's that sort of balance between being pushy and being a pushover.
Right. Right. Oh, wow.
You know?
That's so
And so,
interesting. You kind of
so
already
if it's
answered my next question, but it was going to be why is getting hand reading helpful for someone? Like, why would
I
someone
think,
get a hand reading?
yeah, I think we covered that. But just to summarize it in another way,
Yeah.
um, the way we look at the hand, there are five analyses you can do from the hand.
Yeah.
One for each of the elements. So you've got earth analysis, so you can look at health from the hand. So you can see your genetic patterns, you can see what you're genetically predisposed to, you can see what illnesses you've got
Right.
currently going on in your hand.
Right.
So that's the sort of medical or health side of it.
Hmm.
Um, the water level analysis is emotions and relationships. So you can see how you relate to people, what your emotional needs are, what your sexual proclivities are as well. That's all revealed in the hand.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I've even done relationship analysis for couples where people will come and look at both the hands and I kind of assess the compatibility. So you
Wow.
can even sort of see people's emotional languages and people's emotional styles and see whether they will work together. Or like, I need this in the relationship. Well, I don't. And then, well, okay, well, either you're not going to understand that her needs. They seem demanding to you. So that's not going to work. Or you can say, you've got a compatibility in these things. Or if you've got a relationship that's quite committed, and despite the differences, you can say, this is your needs and these are your dynamics. These are your needs, and this is what you've got to work out together.
Yeah.
So you can facilitate those kind of conversations.
Hmm.
The fire level analysis is looking at the hand in terms of the skills and abilities that you have. So um, people have gifts. People are born with gifts. I mean, you can work out what people do from looking at the hand. I mean, it's like you can do vocational analysis from the hand. You can,
Wow.
you get a 20-year-old and you say, right, you should go to college and do this and study that because this is what you're like.
Right.
Fuck going to the careers advice center at school. You
Mhm.
can actually work those things out from from people's hands. Like if they got any particular skills and talents and abilities, that's really obvious to see from the hand.
Wow. Okay.
And it's also quite interesting when you look at the hands of like 50 or 60-year-olds, and you go, and I've done this, and you go, well, I think you should have been an engineer, or you could have been a soldier, or if you were a young man, I'd tell you, go, they say, well, that's all the jobs I've done. And then you get people who tell you, you tell them what they could do, and they basically say, well, you just described my entire working life. So you can kind of do it retrospectively too.
Yeah.
Air level is psychologically, is looking at personality, temperament, like psychoanalytic stuff, like the relationship with your mother, relationship with your father, trauma from childhood, and so that's psychological profiling can be done from the hand, and that's the most common one. That's the one that most people come for. And then you've also got what I call spiritual analysis, or ether, which is like spiritual analysis, which is kind of like can encompass all of those things, but it can also kind of encompass like a kind of where am I in my life's journey and where am I going to go? And that's like looking at, and that composes two sort of different components really. That comprises looking at the patterns of karma that are in your hand, because your hand is an expression of the patterns of karma. Right. And so you can see your karmic paths in the hand, like for example, the fingerprint patterns are very important indicators of that. But you can also see trauma in the hand, and part of a spiritual path is about resolving trauma, because you can't kind of evolve spiritually until if you're being held back by traumas that from your childhood that are kind of inhibiting you in that way. So it's kind of, and one of the projects I'm working on at the moment is correlating markings of the hand as features of the lines of the hand as marks of dysfunction in the chakra. So there's a whole so you can actually, so a lot of trauma tends to get locked into the body. And then when it locks in the body, it kind of locks energetically, in the throat or the root chakra or wherever on the heart. And I'm just got this project I've been starting on this year, because it's kind of mapping trauma and patterns of the hand, and like so you can see how that's a reflection of the trauma, where it's located physically, like within the chakra system in the body. So and then healing that, of course, is a kind of major part of kind of spiritual evolution of that person. So kind of there's five types of analysis that you can do from the hand. Any one of those analyses is between it's about an hour and a half, requires about an hour and a half time. So you wouldn't do all of those in one go. You would tend to focus on one or the other. Yeah. But someone comes to a psychological analysis and I can see that their kidneys are falling over and they've got heart disease. I'm not going to ignore that and not tell them. It's like, oh yeah, psychologically you're fine. I don't want to talk about your heart. No, I didn't pay for my heart. Okay, well I want to know then. No, that's what so sometimes it's like what you see in what is presented in front of you is what you talk about. Totally. Yeah. But sometimes people want more than that. I don't usually do more than 3 hours. It's exhausting to do more than 3 hours. People can't take all that information in anyway. So,
wow. So you just really scratched the very surface with my hands.
I picked out a couple of pertinent things from your hand, and thank you for sending your prints earlier, because it's what I'm finding this kind of conversation, it's much more significant to you, because you can see you can understand the importance or the significance of this, because I've talked about your own experience, and you know that I don't know you, and you know there's no way I could know this about you, and I've said loads of things about you that are spot on, and you go, wow, and that's demonstrating how efficacious it can be. But you're right, if we'd actually sat down for an hour and a half in a private room and we had more time to explore each of those things than we would, but it's I mean, so, and I charge $150, so and well for a basic reading, and then longer and more if it's longer, so.
Where are you based?
I'm in Auckland on the North Shore in Takapuna.
Okay.
So all my address details and contact details are on my Sam Mitsu Facebook page.
And how do you
or on my website?
In the show notes. Yeah. I'll put your Facebook in the show notes for people to find. And people who live overseas, can they get a hand reading from you as well?
Oh, kind of. That's more tricky. I try to do it in person, really, because like you've just sent me photographs of your hand, and they're not that great. They're okay, and for the purposes of this conversation, they were fine. But you saw the handprint. When you've got a handprint, it's so much more detail that you can do. And it's like it's a detective story, So you're working through all these little things. And you want to be able to see all the clues. It's like if you've only got half the information, like you only sent me that photograph of the fingerprints on one hand.
Yeah.
Like okay, and so I don't know what your fingerprints are on the other hand. You told me what you think they are, but you're not an expert. you know. So I now have to make an assumption that you've got 9 loops and 1 whirl, but I don't know if that's true, because I don't know that true for my own. That gives a little bit of doubt and uncertainty, which means I can't explore things as fully as I would want to. The things I've talked about in your hand are the things that are really clear, and I can see them even from the photographs, you know, like, okay, that's bent, that's lines like. So I've only talked about the things that are really clear and distinct, because there's no argument, there's no dispute or no doubt in my mind about them. But when you're talking about some kind of really subtle analysis, you know, then it requires that detailed observation. So I can do a shorter reading. I mean, I go to festivals, and I go to I do the crystal. Do you know the crystal healing markets that go around Auckland?
No.
They're usually every weekend. They're in Orewa, Pukekohe, Milford, sometimes Te Atatu, every Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's called the Crystal Visions Healing Market. There's crystal stalls there. There's tarot readers and mediums and channelers and healers, and then I go there too. So people can come along to that too. And I just do half hour hand readings there, which is similar to what we've just done today, you know, because you get the live hand. I haven't got time to take the print, so you do the live hand, and you just pick out the most kind of salient features. So if people are abroad and they can send me good photographs, I could probably do a short hand reading, but it has to be on the understanding that there may be some things that miss. And if you think about even what we've talked about, you know, we've touched on some very potent and charged things for you in your life. If you were here in this room, I can hold space much better for you. And then we have time, and I've got other techniques that I use, and we can say, okay, let's go and explore that, and it may be appropriate, you know, it's to explore those in more detail, to emotionally cathartic, you know, about those things. Whereas if I'm online, you know, and I'm doing it for half an hour, like, how do you know, how you tell someone that they've been sexually abused, and they go, you can't just leave them with that information, you know. It's like you've got to kind of work with it in some kind of. So ethically, you've got to provide that support, and that's why I'm reticent about doing it not in person, because you can't really offer the support in that kind of way. And if it was just fortune telling, it would be fine, but it isn't. And so if you do shorthand readings, it encourages people to think that it's fortune telling and not trauma cathartic release self-revelation readings, which is what they are. So.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Christopher. Thank you. It was
you're very welcome,
so fun talking to you, and just going over those lines on the palms and stuff, and the different lengths of the fingers and everything. It was so interesting.
You're very welcome. I've enjoyed it today. Thank you very much for inviting me along. Send me a link to the post when it's done, and if there's any further information you want, get in touch, and maybe come and have a proper hand reading.
For sure, I will. Awesome. You're close. Great. Thank you. Hey YouTube fam, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button below. And if you think a friend, a family member, or just someone you know who could benefit from this podcast episode, please share this video with them. And if you've been enjoying the Elevate Your Soul podcast, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for new episodes weekly. Thank you.